Hi, this is Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. This is going to be a bit of a shaky cam video because I got to show you what I'm seeing. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play a note and you're going to hear a problem. So that's the G string on this Jazzmaster. Now, buzzes, when you encounter them, are really annoying problems to suss out, because there are a lot of parts on a guitar and there are a lot of things that could be buzzing. In a lot of cases, what it really comes down to, at least as far as what I encounter, is experience and knowing the guitars that I'm working on. In this case, I know that I have a bridge on here that is potentially problematic and that the buzz is kind of coming from this region in here. Now, on these fenders with a low break angle, usually my first step to diagnosing a buzz is to go down here and kind of mute this stuff and play, but of course we're still getting the buzz. We can also look for points of contact down here that might be problematic. There actually is kind of a problematic point of contact right here. This string is actually impacting on this screw here, and we have kind of the same situation over here on the low E string. Not particularly happy about that, but there's not really a whole lot that I can do about it without swapping out those screws. These pieces being so close together but not necessarily being super tight can cause a sympathetic rattle. And, that could be a thing that's happening aside from what I'm going to show you. What I will talk about just briefly is that if you are dealing with some buzz that's coming from this region and it's not what I'm about to show you, try taking a piece of felt or like a scrap made of an old flannel shirt or something like that and stuff it in this area here and see if that fixes the problem for you. Because in a lot of cases what's happening is that this break angle over the bridge is just simply not steep enough to keep overtones from kind of bleeding over into this area here and kind of doing some unhappy things. However, our buzz is due to something a little different. Now, if you notice, these screws that adjust the intonation of the saddle, that is, the screws that move the saddles forward or backward, are, if you go overhead, sitting right below the strings. And it's not my favorite, because if you tilt this guitar up, you might notice that these screws kind of come up at a little bit of an angle. So if the string is right above the screw and the screw is coming up at an angle, you can see how that might be a problem, because what we have here is that on the G string, the tip of this screw is coming in contact with the G string just enough to cause that buzz. Now, what this is going to do, if you don't know what's going on, is it's going to cause a hell of a lot of problems when going to intonate, because your point of contact is partially on that screw and partially on the saddle, and so you're going to get a lot of very confused readings. So when you play open, you're going to get the open note, and when you go down to the 12th fret, because it increases the break angle on this side of the saddle, you may even get just the tip of that screw, and it's going to screw with you. So what are we going to do about this? Now, there are various solutions that we can try. We could try lowering, raising the platform of the bridge and then lowering those screws. The problem with that is that we have another point of possible buzzing, which is back here. So as this string breaks over the low E, you have this little area back here where you have this screw and you have the back of this platform. And that can actually cause some buzzing too. So if this gets too close to this without actually making contact with it, that can be a buzz problem. I don't actually like having this string make contact with the back of the bridge here, because if that is happening, it means that you might have some issues with tuning stability with the tremolo, because what you want here is you want the strings to be able to kind of glide nicely, and you don't want anything catching on a corner, and this is a corner, and especially for this low E string, that might pose a tuning problem. So I don't necessarily want to go in and raise the platform and lower the saddles, because if I do that, I'm probably going to end up with some issues with this string and the high E making contact with the back of that platform. So that leaves me with really only one solution, which is to actually shorten this screw. Now, I know I'm kind of in the neighborhood of where I need to intonate this G string, but we won't fully know where until you know, we can get it properly intonated. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up here at kind of what we have available and, you know, kind of count back on here. So we got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threads here that would get me kind of far away. But if I really want to get far away, I'm probably going to want to cut it back about 7. And that 7 is going to leave me just a little bit of screw in front here, because I don't want to cut it right directly to the saddle, because we might need to move the saddle forward. And if we do that, we don't want to overshoot the screw here. So we're going to have to kind of hit this in a real sweet spot. So we're going to cut back about 7 thread lengths here, and then we're going to put the screw and the spring back in, and we're going to have to, you know, bring this back up to the radius, bring this back up into the ballpark area, and then we can dial in the intonation from there. Now, as far as like what tool I would recommend for, you know, cutting one of these screws are pretty hard metal. Usually they're not like the hardest metal, but they are generally made out of steel, and steel is kind of hard to cut. If you have a bolt cutter and some sanders, bolt cutter really is not my preferred tool for cutting something this fine, but if you're really good with it, you can kind of cut this close to where you need it to be, and then you can finish it up with a sander at the very tip and kind of, you know, make that a nice shape in the front. My preferred method, though, is to use a Dremel with a cutting disc. And I don't want to do the Dremel with a cutting disc anywhere near the guitar. For one thing, I'm going to cut the strings. For another thing, it's going to create a bunch of magnetic steel dust, which is going to stick to the pickup. So you definitely want to remove this. And you definitely want to have a firm thing to clamp that screw to. A really good way to clamp that screw, incidentally, is to figure out how big that screw is and find a little piece of scrap wood and then drill a hole through that scrap wood about the same size as the screw, so that the screw is protruding out the other side. And that'll hold it nice and firm while you take that cutting disc to it and just kind of zip that top off of it. Once you have the top zipped off of it, you are going to want to kind of round off those corners a little bit so the threads are nice, you know, when they go back into the saddle, because otherwise, you know, you could throw something in there that might chew things up and cross thread, and that's not a good day for anybody. But yeah, this is going to have to be modified, which is my typical experience with these bridges. Like, these are really not my favorite Fender bridges. They got some problems. This is one of the problems they got. And, you know, they're never going to change it. They're going to continue putting these on. Now, if you have this problem with your bridge and you don't want to deal with all of what I'm doing here, you can look for third-party bridges that are better made than these Fender bridges are stock. There's a thing called a mastery bridge that's a bit expensive, but it's a very, very good bridge if you have one of these offset Fenders with this style of bridge on it. They're just a much better piece of hardware. They work much better. They're much easier to do setups with, and they're better for the player. They also have a pretty decent amount of heft to them, and so they help with kind of the lack of sustain that these guitars tend to have. So, you know, if that's something that you're looking for, you might look into that. There are probably also a lot of other third-party companies out there producing aftermarket bridges for these guitars. So, you know, you might find some really good options out there. Personally, what I would recommend is that if you can, with tremolo systems like this, where you have a rocker bridge, which this bridge is designed to kind of rock back and forth to kind of deal with the string motion. If you can replace that rocking bridge with something that has rollers on it, rock and roll. If you can replace that rocking bridge with something that has rollers on it, I think you're going to have much better time with tuning stability when you go to use your tremolo. So that's my spiel here on this buzzing area that can often happen on these Fender offset guitars. There are some other areas that I want to mention just very briefly. Fender headstocks have this issue, which is that they don't have much of a break angle over the nut either. And as we kind of discussed at the bridge end, when you don't have a lot of a break angle, it kind of leads to this situation where there's a tendency for overtones to kind of bleed over into this area here. So, like, in fact, if we go and we pluck this G string here, you can hear that G string resonating on this side of the nut, which isn't the best in my opinion. In fact, one of the issues with this particular headstock is that I would like to see a second string tree. Some fenders do have a second string tree, and I think that that is actually a really good idea, because this length here is a bit of a kind of a long run. That long run thing is why this is here, because this is just asking for overtones and problems, whereas this one is also a little too long in my opinion. But this one you can kind of get by if you cut the nut properly, which, you know, this one is. This area over here can also cause buzzing. So if you are listening to some buzz on one of these guitars, try to pay attention to which ear you're hearing it from, whether it's coming from this side of the guitar or whether it's coming from this side of the guitar. Most frequently on these guys, you're going to be hearing something in this region, and it's probably going to be either something impacting on the back of the bridge here, or something impacting on the screw, or you might have a situation like this one has where it's impacting on top of this screw here, or you have something happening where maybe one of these is touching and the other one isn't quite touching, in which case, you know, kind of putting your finger down on both of them and kind of rocking it back and forth can kind of fix that. If that doesn't fix it, you know, then you know it's something else. Or you could be dealing with exactly what this one has going on, which is that you might have a screw that's impacting on the bottom of the string. And so these are all some common points to look at that, you know, are kind of the usual suspects, if you will, when it comes to buzzing on these offset fenders. Anyway, this has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. If you found this video helpful and entertaining, please link it around to your friends who might also enjoy it. Like, subscribe, hit that bell button, as always. And also, if you want to kick me a few bucks, there's a link to my Ko-Fi and my Patreon in the description of the video. Also, there is a link to my Reverb page where I sell some parts and sometimes some guitars, and there's also a link down there to my website where you can find my contact information as well as my pricing info for my repair work, and a page that I wrote on caring for stringed instruments. Newly added to my page is a page all about fretwork, and you can access that by going to my price page and clicking on any of the hyperlinks under fretwork, and that'll have all your gold Evo and stainless steel and nickel silver compound radius and, you know, going fretless, basically anything you could possibly want to know about fretwork. So go and check that out if it sounds interesting to you. And this has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. Thanks for watching.